Hello everybody, it's Suzy Greaves. I am the editor at Psychologies magazine, and I'm very excited because we have the most amazing educationist with us, our lovely Sir Ken Robinson, who is here to talk about his new book, You, Your Child and School. I'm privileged to talk to you today. I watched a video, is it 12 years ago now?
No, it just feels like 12 years ago. It was, actually it was 2006.
Yeah, because I just had my boy, so
yes,
my son's 15 now, and it just came out, and I was fascinated by what you say. So creativity is one of my highest values.
Yeah.
So it's quite a hero of mine about what you do. So you're author of my favourite book of yours is The Element, which is how finding your passion changes everything. So I want to talk to you a little bit about that as well, not just about your new book, but your official title is Global Leader in Educational Transformation.
That's not a title I give myself, but
it's very good.
I've heard it said.
Look, we've got lots of hearts already. Hello everybody. Hi Janet. Hi Gail. Do Schools Kill Creativity has been viewed over 40 million times, your TED Talk, so it's quite popular.
It's 50 million, but
50 million now?
It's not up to me to say that.
Yeah, so how do we lose 10
I've
million?
checked it another 10 million times since I saw it.
Amazing.
No, it's about 50 million now. Yeah.
But let's start with your new book. So you've got You, Your Child and School, which is what inspired you to write this book?
Well, I'm a parent. I've got 2 kids, and I speak to parents all the time, and I know that parents are anxious and perplexed about what's happening in education. I think often parents are not clear why things have developed in the way they have. All this testing that's going on, the big pressure to go to university. They're worried about student debt, student loans, the best way to advise their kids. And they can see their kids under a huge amount of pressure at school too. And so I've been asked about it a lot as I travel around, and I thought I could say something helpful to parents about what is going on, what sort of education their kids need and how they can get it.
Yeah, so tell us a little bit, kind of give us a kind of overview of the book. So to answer that question, what should we look for in our children? I know you've written a few thousand words on it, but in a soundbite, Ken, tell us, what should we be looking for?
Well, I think that parents need to look in 2 directions. One is at their own children. It's an article of faith of mine that all children are different. And I mean, they obviously have things in common because they're human beings. But they're all also unique individuals.
Yes.
And I remember years ago I did an event in Vancouver. It was a peace summit, and the guest of honor was the Dalai Lama.
I met him last year.
He's fantastic.
Yeah.
A fantastic person. And so I was moderating this opening session. And he said lots of wonderful things. The opening session was called World Peace Through Personal Peace.
World Peace Through
Personal Peace. And
yes.
Anyway, he said lots of wonderful things, but one of the things he said was to be born at all is a miracle. So what are you going to do with your life? He said this to the room, it wasn't to me personally. And it's a very simple thing to say, but it's a very important thing to register, because every human life is different and unique and unrepeatable. And that, to me, is a very important foundation of the way we think about education. So one of the messages of the book is for parents to look at their children. And I always make people a bet, that if they've got 2 children or more, I bet is, and I always win it, is that they're completely different from each other.
Yeah.
Because they are, we all are. So part of the book is about that. And then the other is, well, what's going on in the world and what type of education do our kids need to make their way in it? So a big starting point for me is that we all live not in one world, but 2. There's a world that we live in that was there before we came into it. It's a world that exists whether or not we exist. It's a world that will be there when we've gone. And part of the role of education, a big part of it, is to help kids understand how that world came to be the way it is and what we understand about it and what we can make of it. But there's another world that exists only because we exist. It's the world of our own consciousness, our inner being, the world that came to being when you did and will end when you do. Yeah. And a big role of education is to help children understand that world too. And I think we don't do a very good job of that. And it's really only in the interaction between the 2 that we make a life. So a big part of the book is about that. It's about what do we know about how children develop, what do we know about your child in particular, and what kind of education do they need now to navigate their way through both these worlds.
I mean, you're talking about those interactions between the system that is currently there and how we react to it and how we can, for me, you know, I'm also a coach as well as an editor. So I feel like I'm coaching my son quite a lot around, okay, this is happening here. So he's 15. So he's at this very strange age where he's starting to rebel and have an opinion, and it's okay. What's the best way to integrate the system with that kind of consciousness that they're starting to have about my place in the world?
Well, one of the points I make early on in the book is that there's a difference between learning, education, and school. And learning is the foundation of this. I mean, learning is the process of acquiring new skills and understanding.
Yeah.
And as I say it anyway, and children are born with a rapacious appetite.
Yes.
To learn. They're kind of, as it were, furiously curious about the world around them. And you don't have to look at the startling things that children achieve in the first few years of life. They learn to speak, they learn to connect to people, they learn all kinds of social cues. I mean, it's an extraordinary growth curve that they're on right from the very beginning. Education, as I understand it, or as I see it, is a more organised approach to learning. And for most people, the most sustained experience that they have of that is what in America is called the K through 12 system, you know, but from primary and secondary school.
Yeah.
A school is a community of learners. And I'm all for schools because we learn most of what we do know from other people.
Yes.
The people around us. The thing is, kids love to learn. They don't all get on with education, and some have a very bad time at school.
Yes.
And it's not because there's something wrong with the kids, it's because I think of the way we do school. A school, let's say, is a community of learners, properly conceived, but we've come to think of schools as certain types of institutions, with certain kinds of habits and algorithms and behaviours, and some people just don't get on with it. So what I'm interested in is adapting school to how people learn rather than adapting kids to the way school works.
Yes.
So that when, you know, what's your son's name?
Charlie.
Yeah. So, you know, when Charlie reaches that age, you know, where he's asking new sorts of questions, you want a learning environment where he's able to explore them and to think about them properly, to be challenged, and not one where he's being held back by artificial barriers or being thwarted in his attempts to learn because there's some testing convention that he's hit up against, which, I mean, a lot of things that go on in schools don't really have much to do with learning. They're to do with efficiency, or they're to do with national political agendas, and a lot of them get in the way of it. And I think that's why I'm saying we should reimagine school in a way that really is conducive to how people learn, at whatever age they're at, and it changes, of course, as they get older.
And I mean, that comes across beautifully in the book. But there was, for me, reading it, I felt No. I had this kind of sense of frustration because my boy actually goes to a great school.
Yeah.
It's a brilliant, supportive, fantastic learning environment. So it's great.
Yeah.
But there's also that piece of they're in there, and you can he's you know, what is his passion? He said, "Mom, it's drama," and I'm like, "Great." Which, you know, terrifies me because it seems to be such a precarious if he wanted to be an actor as a profession. But it's okay.
Which he may or may not.
Yeah. Sure, but he may use those skills that he has.
That's right.
But it's that the idea, oh, well, why do I have to learn science? Why do I have to do maths? Yeah. So how do we, when they're already in the system and we can't...
Does he really speak like that, or is that just...
how do we kind of, they're in the system, they're bucking against the system. Mm-hmm. How do we coach our children to learn about the system that I'm trying to teach you? This is the system you're in right now. So, you know, let's see how we can make that the best opportunity for you to learn. Yeah. But for you, what advice would you give to parents whose children are maybe bucking against it? The school isn't working for their child. What advice would you give?
Well, I'll just preface it by saying that I mean, sometimes, I mean, I've written a lot, as you know, and talked a lot about the importance of creativity. And sometimes I think people who haven't taken the time to think about creativity properly make an assumption that being creative is all about just letting go and being free and, you know, whatever comes into your head. And of course, it's nothing like that at all. It's creativity in any discipline, any field, requires skills and knowledge and understanding and the application of rigor and hard work. To be thoroughly going creative in any proper sense of the term. And so the reason I'm saying that is that I'm not advocating, for what it's worth, that we remove all challenges or obstacles and that anything that discommodes young people is a bad thing in itself, because learning to deal with challenges and becoming more resilient in the face of them and buckling down and getting on with things and doing things that are difficult is all part of what it takes to grow up and become an independent person. And it's a good cast of mind to develop. None of us really gets anywhere by trying to live a friction-free life. But there's a difference between genuine, legitimate challenges, which help you grow and develop and deepen your skills and understanding, and things that are just irritating because they're unnecessarily obstructive to what you're trying to get done. And it's why I'm saying, for example, in the school system, there's some things that go on that are really we could just do without, because they create problems all of their own, like educating kids by age group. It's become a habit of mine that we do that, but we don't do it anywhere else. We don't keep all the 8-year-olds separate from all the 12-year-olds once they leave school. And learning is often done most effectively when people learn across age groups and help to teach each other and learn each other. It's what happens in families. We don't carve the world up into separate subjects once we leave school. We just do it at school. And in fact, a lot of the most interesting stuff happens at the point where all these disciplines start to interact with each other. So there are some legitimate challenges which we don't help our children by getting them to avoid all the time. But then some things just are counterproductive. So what you do, what I'm arguing in the book is that as a parent, you have some choices here, because a lot of parents I know feel powerless and exasperated by some things that go on in schools. I should say, by the way, as well, this is not a book that is in any way trying to criticize schools or teachers. I've worked in education my whole life. I've been, I hope people recognize, a staunch advocate of the importance of teaching as a profession, and that's what I've always done. But a lot of teachers and schools don't like the obstacles they have to work with in the system either. It's not like they're opposing parents. They'd like to get rid of a lot of the stuff that gets in their way too. So you have a choice. One of them is you can work with the system as it is and try and improve it for your own child by working more productively and creatively in partnership with the school. And good schools welcome that. They welcome constructive relationships with parents, and they should. There's obviously a balance to be struck. You don't want parents showing up at every 5 minutes school door saying, I don't believe we gave him a C- when it clearly merited an A+. You don't need that all the time.
No.
But a constructive partnership is a good thing. And getting to know the school, helping the school to understand your own child, it has all kinds of benefits. So you can work with the system as it is. You can work with other parents to exert influence over policies that don't just affect you, but affect everybody. In America, for example, there's been a growing movement of parents who are pushing back against the effects of testing. And it's having an effect. Because they ought to have a voice, and they can have a voice if they work collectively. So you can do that. You can work to change the system as it is. And you have a third option, which is to get out of it. If you really feel that your child is having a very bad time with the system and that it's not really fixable. And if that is the situation, then there are alternative schools, there are alternative education programs, there's homeschooling, which is a small but I think increasingly significant part of education.
I know you talk about Steiner a little bit in the book. I live just down the road from Michael Hall in East Grinstead, so it's this huge kind of Steiner, very creative environment.
Well, and Montessori Steiner, Waldorf. There are all kinds of proprietary systems. And I think it's important to recognise that. When we look at how to improve education, firstly, there are fantastic schools out there anyhow. There are great teachers out there, and we've been looking at these issues for a long time. It's not like we've come across some rare strain of disease and we have no idea what to do about it. I think part of the problem is that the politicians often who drift in and out of education and are keen to make a mark introduce one initiative after another, which contradicts what we already know works in schools. So there are options to get out, and say a small but growing number of people doing that. But the key thing I'm trying to say in the book is you're not powerless. You do have some options and choices. And I try to explain what they are.
And that's one of the things that comes across in the book it is very empowering to parents, because sometimes you do feel powerless and you
Yes.
feel a little bit panicked
Yes.
of, what could, our children, we love them more than life itself, and we want to support them in the best way, but sometimes there's so much conflicting advice about what you should do, and that
Yes.
some of the, especially about what so for me, working with the school is a great example of,
Yes.
how we can work together to get the outcome.
Well, I think it's increasingly important because the pressures on kids aren't just coming from school. I mean, I do think that kids are more pressured at school these days than certainly my generation was. I mean, there were moments of pressure.
Yes.
When I was at school, people of my generation, there definitely were. When you came up to your O levels and A levels, that these sort of crunch points, in your life, and and odd moments throughout. Whether it's a production arm or there's some big game or something. It's not as if it was all stress free at all. But that's not the same as this relentless pressure many people are now feeling to perform, and it's starting young. I mean, it's starting in preschool.
Yes.
And not everywhere, but in America where I live now, there's been a big pressure to test preschool kids. They're talking about baseline testing here. Well, in a lot of European countries, that just doesn't happen.
Yeah.
Finland, which is a system I've often talked about, I mean, they don't do all that. There's a very important point in letting kids be kids when they're little. I mean, for example, I'm involved in a campaign at the moment to remind people, I should say, of the importance of play.
Yes. And sleep.
And sleep.
Yes.
Play and sleep.
Yes.
Come on. There was in America, because of the pressures of standardized testing, there's been a trend for schools whose own funding and stability depends upon the results they get in tests.
Yeah.
There's been a trend in some districts to cut back on playtime, or recess as they call it in America. And so kids can go
mad.
It's actually, I think it's insane. In Texas, recently there's an institution called the Texas Christian University.
Yeah.
And they've put together a consortium of schools to reinstate recess. So you've got now in these schools kids getting 3 20-minute playtimes.
Yes.
And of course, what they're finding is that kids are more engaged at school.
Yeah.
They can concentrate. Elementary school kids. Yeah. And they're doing better overall at school. But what was really interesting to me was there was a news report on, I think it was ABC News, where they had this reporter in the school playground with a microphone, like she's embedded in some war zone, and saying, here I am in Texas. It's like children found playing in Texas. And they said, these children are just running around, they're playing, they're making up games, and they really seem to be enjoying themselves. They're doing this 3 times a day, so that. So they're talking to parents and say, so what do you think about this? I mean, do you think this is a good idea? I said, well, I really do think I like it. And then they have this kind of strokey beard panel in the studio saying, now, what do you think this is a good thing? So, well, actually, the evidence says it really is helping to improve test scores. And I think we've lost our minds at this point, haven't we? When we're rediscovering the fact that children need to play, that they are physical creatures, that they are social, emotional creatures.
Yeah.
Because what ends up happening is that you sit kids down hour after hour, day after day, doing low-grade clerical work, from an early age, and then they start to fidget, and then you suddenly start diagnosing with learning disorders.
Yeah.
And I'm not saying, I have a whole section in the book, as you know, about attention deficit problems. I'm not saying there's no such thing, but I think most people agree that it's hard to detect it, and it's not certain very often that people who are diagnosed with it actually have that.
Yeah.
And often people are being diagnosed, so kids with these learning disorders, on the scantest of evidence.
Yeah.
And people are reaching for drugs to try and keep these kids with the program. And I think let's just change the program.
And also it feels like this kind of obsession with productivity, and you talk about it in the book.
Mm-hmm.
It's I think you said in 2020, what's important is creativity, flexibility, collaboration, and teamwork, and emotional intelligence. And we're teaching our children about productivity, and it comes out in square boxes, our poor old children. How do we start educating our children about emotional intelligence? I mean, for me, it's like coaching into schools. Teach them about how to, or coach them rather than teach them to understand how they work, meditation, all of those things. I'm passionate about that idea. But
well, you spoke to Goldie, didn't you?
Yes, Goldie Moore. Yes,
I'm on Goldie's board, Minder.
Yes, She does amazing work.
That's fantastic. And,
yeah.
The thing, a big part of this, and I think, certainly my view of it, is that a lot of the problems that we see in education are caused by the system itself. The system creates the problem.
Yes.
So, for example, there's a lot of stress and anxiety among young people, and an alarming number of kids are self-harming in their early years. And worse than that. And a lot of it's to do, not all of it, but a lot of it's to do with the pressures of school, peer pressures. It's compounded by social media.
Yes, I want to talk to you about that. Yeah.
In America, which I feel competent to talk about, on average, the non-graduation rate from high school is about 20%. In other words, about 20% of the kids who start the 9th grade don't complete the 12th grade, the top end of secondary school. But it's not that they don't want to learn. It's not that they don't want a future.
Yes.
It's not that they don't want to make something of themselves. It's that they don't really square with the system. So there are lots of alternative education programs out there.
Yes.
And on the whole, the effectiveness that kids get re-engaged and want to learn. And some of these programs, I talked about them in the book, are in some of the most difficult, most deprived, threatening environments in the country. But you get, well-motivated, professional educators working alongside families, and they get the kids back on their feet.
Yeah.
Well, it's not the kids who are presenting the problem, it's the system itself doesn't fit them. It's like if you have an education system with a very narrow view of ability, you automatically generate a very large conception of inability.
Yeah.
People don't fit the dominant model.
Yeah.
And if you change that, if you have a more expansive conception of achievement and ability, then kids come into their own, they find they're capable of doing things, they get more confident in their learning, they get more engaged, and things flourish in a different way.
Yes.
And it's simply that. If you change the environment, then you get a different result.
No, I was a mentor when I was in my 20s with some little girls who'd been excluded from school.
Yes.
And she went on to do the amazing things. Brilliant. She was mentoring me at the end. She was brilliant. She was fantastic. Really great. So I could see that on a very kind of cold-faced way, how that really works. Those systems. Social media, let's quickly go there. This is a concern I hear a lot from parents. I'm worried there's social media, that everyone, I'm on social media all the time. And so my son is, and they're on their screens all the time. I mean, just what can we do to support our children to have a healthier relationship with that? Have you got any ideas?
When I did that first talk at TED, it was 2006, and I should correctly say it's 12 years ago now, isn't it?
Yep.
I remember saying it during the course of that nobody knows what the world will look like in 5 years' time. Well, you don't have to be a clairvoyant to say that stuff these days.
Yeah.
But it's worth remembering that when I gave that talk, nobody had an iPhone. They didn't come out till 2007. So we've had these phones for just over 10 years now.
Yes.
And all the social media that go along with it. One of the reasons the TED Talk has proliferated in the way that it has is because it coincided, within a year or two of the growth of YouTube, in due course Twitter, mobile devices. So there was the means available to proliferate these things in a way that wasn't possible before. I mean, I've given talks like that for years. They just haven't been getting tweeted and being put on Facebook. So a lot of these challenges are recent. I mean, young people have always, particularly in adolescence and their teenage years, have always been kind of fraught and it's a difficult time at the best of times.
It's an emerging time, isn't it?
I mean, they're breaking free and they're becoming self-conscious about all kinds of things. They're wakening up to all kinds of feelings they didn't have before. They're being flooded with hormones. They're becoming self-conscious in all sorts of ways. They're asking questions like you're saying, Charlie, is about the world around them in a way they hadn't before. So it's always been a difficult period of transition. But these days it is being exacerbated by this 24/7 exposure on social media. I mean, at least when we finished school for the day, you might see a couple of friends afterwards, but you'd hang around and watch the television or something. But you weren't online all the time with this constant melodrama going on in the background. You weren't prone to, sadly as some people are, being intimidated online. They're not all. I mean, I wouldn't want to exaggerate how much that goes on, but a significant amount. It does go on.
Yes.
I mean, kids have always bullied each other. There's never been a reason to condone it. But there are now other ways of bullying people that weren't available previously. You can do it anonymously. It can be much more insidious, and we know people are paying a price for it. So, there's a big upside to digital culture. Of course there is.
Yes.
But there's a downside too. And I mean, it's becoming clear, for example, what's happening with Facebook at the moment. And the way people's data is being used in the wrong way. And I remember the guy comes and sorts our computers out at work, and he was saying, of course, you realise now that Apple's got your fingerprints. I thought, actually, I hadn't thought of that. That is true. We're just willingly giving all this stuff up.
I thought about that.
Yeah, absolutely. So there's all this data out there, and we're very vulnerable to that. But also, if you there's a growing number of research studies are showing if young people spend a lot of time on social media, if they're repeatedly on social media, test themselves against other people's views themselves, they're living their lives through a series of likes, thumbs up, and hearts, and all the rest.
Yes.
It's like they're doing constant opinion polls about who they are and whether they match up.
No identity.
Yeah, at a time when their identity is very fragile. There's a good bit of evidence that it's having a negative effect on children's emotional growth and development. I've always thought that social media was an ironic title because they're not really social at all. I mean, they're asocial at best and antisocial in some other ways. But one of the consequences that seems to be emerging for some kids is the more time they spend on social media, the less confident they feel in actual relationships, because they're not learning some things you need to learn, like this, just being in front of somebody. So I do think it's an issue, and I think that parents and schools have some responsibility to figure out a strategy here. I mean, for example, there are lots of ways in which mobile devices and online platforms can be a fantastic aid to learning.
Yeah.
But there can be an obstruction too, and there's nothing wrong for a parent or a school to say, just turn it off now.
Yeah.
Leave it for a bit. It's not a human right that's being violated. You need some time. It's what is happening with mindfulness. The kids are getting very stressed in all kinds of ways, and rather than being online, seeing how if other people are feeling stressed, just turn the thing off and learn some of the techniques of self-composure and of calming yourself. In a
self-soothing almost as well.
And these are ancient principles, but they're becoming more relevant now because the pressures on kids are different.
Yeah, absolutely. And what I'm seeing, this idea in our next issue, we're doing an article about how to break up from your phone. And just, one of the advice was to not have your phone on for a weekend. And I could feel myself going shallow breathing. And I'm like, this is me. And I know all of the mindfulness stuff. I've been doing self-development for 20 years. And I'm thinking, poor children who have had not access to that training or the meditation or anything. And they're going to find it difficult as well. But I think if we can start teaching and coaching and making that, this other world as attractive as this kind of social media way down a rabbit hole. I don't know quite how we do that.
But you are right about that. I mean, the generation of kids growing up now have only known a world of digital devices and social media. And somebody once said, it wasn't me, but I'd like to have said it, but somebody once said that technology is not technology if it happened before you were born. And so to my great-grandparents' generation, electricity was a big deal.
Yes.
Really excited about electricity.
Yeah.
And it's not that long ago, that electricity became what it is in our lives. My parents grew up in a world where people didn't have motor cars routinely. Yeah. My father was born in 1914, my mum in 1919.
Yes.
I grew up in a world where, as a young kid, where people didn't routinely have telephones in the house. By the time I was 10, we did. Yeah. But for the first 10 years of my life, we didn't have a telephone or a television.
Yeah.
So to us, getting a television was like an amazing thing. And to have a phone in the house was extraordinary.
I remember when we got colour TV.
Total break. I just thought, this is magic. I don't understand how this thing works. Yeah. So, but for our kids, my kids, who are now 28 and 32, of course, none of that was, televisions and even home computers weren't a thing.
Yes.
But these were a thing because they didn't have these when they were at school.
Yeah.
But for this generation, social media digital devices, being online all the time, is what they think of as the normal way to live.
Yes.
And it isn't. It's a tiny sliver of human history
Yes.
that these kids have become part of now. And I think it is important that we help them to, like, children don't go out and play as much as they used to.
Yeah.
They don't go in nature as much
Yes.
as they used to. So there are
Yes.
all sorts of
Yeah.
ways in which we need to reconnect kids with it.
The wilderness and going wild, and I try and take my boy and all his friends. We go camping a lot, and
Fantastic.
we throw all the phones in the glove compartment. They're not allowed and it's great because they
Except your phone.
no, they make sure that I lock that away as well. But it's that thing about how do we, and then they enjoy climbing up haystacks or whatever, or resting on the ground or doing what horrible teenage boys do. Yeah,
exactly.
It's good. I'm just aware of some of the comments coming in. We've got lots of people saying how much they love you, which is really lovely. Fantastic. I've got a couple of questions from readers and then we'll finish up.
Yes.
But we've got one very wide question. If you could wave a magic wand, what would you change in the UK education system tomorrow? That was one that came in this morning. That was from Jen.
Magic
wand.
If I had a magic wand, I would remove the barriers that I'm talking about particularly. I'd want to remove a lot of the barriers between subjects in schools, between age groups in schools, and get rid of a lot of the testing. Because none of these things are necessary. In fact, if you look at, you mentioned earlier, really successful systems like Finland, not only, but including Finland, they have overall, against most measures, a more successful education system than most other countries, and they don't have a standardized national curriculum. They don't have a lot of standardized testing, very little of it. They don't have vast amounts of competition pitting the schools against each other or kids against each other. They promote collaboration in a different way. So, if I could, I've tried to set up what I think these obstacles are. I think people need to steady themselves. I think you don't need these things for successful school. In fact, on the contrary, some of these just get in the way.
If a head teacher wanted to sort of start implementing everything that you said in this book, how would they start? So if we've got lots of teachers I know who are Psychologies readers, and you wanted to take this book and your ideas, where would they start? Just buy the book, and have you got something they can sign up to, or?
But buying the book is always a great idea. Well, actually, no, I did a book a while ago called Creative Schools with lots of examples in it. But what we're about to do, we're working on it now, is to launch a platform to put great schools in touch with each other and with parents. So that, I've run a lot of projects in my time, and the most successful ones are those where people collaborate, support each other, learn from each other's ideas, and come together. I know because I travel a lot, and we get a lot of feedback and correspondence from people. We ran a small inquiry of our own a couple of years ago after the 10th anniversary of that TED Talk, saying how has this affected you? And we've got hundreds and hundreds of replies from people saying that it's changed how I teach in my classroom, or it's given me the confidence to, school principals, we've changed the school around, we've changed school districts around. And I know, recently I was in the Middle East, I was in Kuala Lumpur, I was in Australia. And
it's global, isn't it?
Yes, these aren't local issues. Every form of social issue takes a local character. It happens locally, but there are global patterns and trends here. And all around the world, people know that we have to think differently about education. In business, they know it, not all business, but many businesses. In communities, they know it. In schools, parents know it. They know something's up and it needs to be different. So what we're aiming to do is to create a platform which will help facilitate the change, put people in touch with each other, give them the resources and the tools they need to make it happen.
That's such a great idea. And when's that launched?
Hopefully later this year.
Oh, fantastic. So whatever we can do to support that, let us beam that out, because that...
And I'm inviting people really just to get in touch and help us shape this thing up now. But I do think there's an opportunity to do it, and we have, ironically, a lot of the challenges in education are being presented by the developments in digital media, but they also present the tools to solve the challenge.
I think that social media isn't bad. It's being able to use it as a tool, that we use it rather than it using us.
Yeah, so, that's right. It's like anything else. There are wonderful books and bad books, stuff you benefit from reading and stuff not. It's just about the extent to which you're in control of it or it controls you.
Sure. Last question. This is from Emma, I believe. What are the 3 things we can do to create more happiness in schools? And I know you talk about that a lot in the book around happiness. I mean, it's a big question again. But...
Well, because you published a lot about it in the magazine, that there's been a big shift in psychology in recent years. I remember years ago, I wrote a book. Actually, it was a book about, that particular one was about the arts in schools, but I was talking about the work at the time of R.D. Laing.
Yes.
Who made the point in the 70s that the history of psychology, for the most part, has been a history of psychological disturbance, of emotional disturbance, and of feelings as disruptive and unsettling.
Yes.
Or as he called it, we've had a negative psychology of affect.
Yes.
And in the DSM in America, there are hundreds of pages on anxiety, depression, hatred, all the kind of negative emotions.
Yeah.
And until recently, there was a small sliver of things on positive emotions like joy and compassion and love and fellowship and all of those things. Well, Martin Seligman and many other people have been involved in the movement to argue on behalf of positive psychology that feelings are not a deficit in our lives, they're what bring our lives to life. They are integrally embodied and enmeshed in how we think and how we relate. I mean, a world without feeling is unthinkable. It's one of the reasons, not the only reason, but one of the reasons I've always argued so strongly for the arts in schools, because it's through the arts that it's not that we give vent to our feelings, but we find ways of understanding the quality of our lives and the nature of our relationships and what it is to be in the world.
Yes.
Interestingly, you see, Martin Seligman and others like Tom Rath, who began to talk about happiness, have come to favour the term well-being, and I think it is a better term overall, because happiness has a sort of bad press. It sounds like general cheeriness, whereas happiness, properly conceived, isn't just about being in a good mood. It's about being fulfilled and having a sense of purpose and being in a stable place in your life where you feel your life has purpose, meaning, and that it's a life worth living.
Yes.
And there are different aspects it takes. You can have well-being at work, you can have physical well-being in your relationships. So part of my argument in all of this is that we're about to meet in the next week or so our first granddaughter. Our daughter's about to give birth. So, and Adeline, that's her name, we know it's a girl, like all children, will be born with this tremendous set of capacities and possibilities. And like all children, in the ordinary course of events, over the next 20 odd years, she will undergo, as Charlie has, an extraordinary metamorphosis in physically. She'll grow in shape as your son has physically, emotionally, become more sophisticated, more mature, cognitively, they'll come to know and understand things differently, socially, they'll become more adept in their relations with people, and spiritually, they'll get hopefully a better sense of meaning. Human growth and development is multifaceted in all of these different ways. And if education is to be part of helping children, young people develop a sense of well-being, it has to embrace all of those areas of development. So if you sit kids down and just give them academic work to do day in, day out, and test them through standards, a sort of standards-based testing system, all this other stuff, physical, emotional, social, it is being neglected at the most crucial point in their lives.
Yes.
So it's for those reasons we need a broad curriculum. I gave a talk a little while ago. Actually in the talk I said about how I thought dance is important as mathematics.
Yes, I love that.
Well, I remember somebody saying to me, you can't be serious, but I'm absolutely serious, because dance is a vital part of every culture, and it's part of the joyful expression of being a human being that's embodied.
Yeah.
And it's also a vital cultural force in our lives as well.
Yes.
So it isn't to say dance is more important than mathematics. We shouldn't teach mathematics. We should teach dance instead. It's to say that in the balanced curriculum, there is a proper place for all the various ways in which we come to make sense of the world and ourselves. And that includes the arts, the sciences, mathematics, technology, and the rest. And it's by doing that, you can't guarantee anybody's happiness, but you can create conditions where they're more likely to find a sense of well-being. Yeah. And it's why, for example, mindfulness and all the rest, all these techniques for calming the mind, becoming more centered in our bodies, giving ourselves a stronger, more stable sense of consciousness, are now important parts of an education system that gears the world that we live in and what we know about how children grow and develop.
And teaching the children at school, we're great fans of Action for Happiness, Action for Happiness.
Yeah.
And I know that they're talking a lot about trying to take it into schools. But I mean, what's great about your book, when you're reading it, it's not you go through the kind of career well-being, social well-being. And I was not just learning as a parent. I mean, I know I'm supposed to know all this from the actual psychologists.
I thought you did.
But it was lovely to be reminded of all of these things to make me a rounded human being. So what your book is great for, not only as a parent, but also as a human being, just to check in with yourself. It's like, oh, maybe that's why you're feeling a bit unhappy in that area. How connected are you in your community?
Yes.
I thought, okay, that's really good. So,
well, thank you. Thank you.
Thank you so much for writing this book. Thank you so much for being you. I mean, really, you're such massive inspiration to me and to all of our readers. So say goodbye to all our readers. Thank you very much for getting lots of comments. But thank you very much, everybody. Bye-bye, everybody.